people who are highly competent and able but unwilling, and people who are unable but very willing. So our role as leader is to ensure that we lead from behind, get everybody on board so that the X and the Y axis, you can have a smooth line. The complaint mostly is, you are the boss, you endure all the perks, we do all the hard work. So for a leader, I think leading from behind could make a difference. Now going into the topic proper about beyond tariffs and doing alignment for inter-African trade. From our sector, what we know is that the ports and maritime business is about 80% of all international trade goes through seaports. And West Africa in particular has seen a tremendous growth. As what we can see from the UNCTAD review of maritime transport, world maritime trade grew to about 12.6 billion tons, and the value of that trade is more than 33 billion US dollars in 2024 alone, and it's expected to grow by 4.3%. Now, out of these global trade volumes, Africa accounts for about 9%, and it's expected to grow in the coming years. In our region, West Africa, ECOWAS, there is a population of more than 425 million, and the annual exports alone are valued at more than 168 billion US dollars. And Nigeria, for example, accounts for more than 27% of that. One of the aspects that has affected global maritime trade is recently there's been surge in the freight rates, increased global import price levels by 11%. So this has affected consumer price levels as well. By end of 2022, freight rates has jumped from about $4,000 to more than $7,000 for 120-foot container alone. Some of the challenges in the global shipping has to do with infrastructure development, the use of technology now, AI, access to capital, and the environmental issues and climate resilience. When it comes to institutional alignment, the example I can cite from our end is that there is an increased demand on the port facility as the cargo volumes tend to grow. Now, what most institutions are doing, particularly customs, which are responsible for most of the trade and logistics movement along the value chain, is that they come up with time-release studies to identify all the bottlenecks in the value chain. Other countries have issues, for example, in Gambia, we're surrounded by a neighbor, except for the opening to the ocean, meaning that cross-border trade has to go through a lot of bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. At the level of ECOWAS, efforts have been made through the external tariff liberalization scheme and the CFTA trade liberalization agreement. They have bilateral joint commissions on trade facilitation, but mostly border controls becomes an issue when goods are moved from country to country. The ECOWAS Interstate Road Transit Agreement is with a view to ensuring that there's a seamless movement across borders. Another outfit that is also trying to align along institutions to ensure that there's a seamless transport and distribution along the value chain is the Federation of West African Chambers of Commerce, FEWASI, and they're doing a good job in trying to promote coastal shipping and inter-regional trade. But mostly the challenges at the inception sites are with priority access to terminal facilities and issues of cabotage. What the ECOWAS is also doing is to have this Trans-African Highway number 7, which links Lagos to Dakar. The Lagos-Abidjan leg is already done in terms of the road infrastructure. Now the challenge is to link Abidjan to Dakar. But for a country like the Gambia, the weakest link is how to link the capital with the neighboring Senegal, which means that there has to be a bridge over a river Gambia. Public-private partnerships is also one of the issues that can really help in bringing about alignment for intra-African trade. What we have realized is that the private sector are quicker in achieving results, particularly for project needs. They have proven to be quicker in raising the finances that is required. They have the management expertise and market knowledge. Now, governments usually are required to leverage on this potential so that they can commit the private sector to set timelines. At the level of the International Maritime Organization, which is the body that is governing ports and maritime, they are encouraging more of private sector to invest in port ownership and management. Now, public port authorities worldwide have also been found to be slow because under government, the need to react to dynamic forces of the market are usually slow. And the relevant conventions are ensuring that there's relative safety and efficiency in moving to remove some of the cumbersome bottlenecks involved in bureaucracy and particularly procurement. If you look at the coast in Western Central Africa, almost all the ports are dotted with some injection of private capital, from Nouadhibou in Mauritania up to Lobito in Angola. It's all with a view to having increased access to capital for infrastructure development, reduce the congestion and inefficiencies, all of which will translate to reducing the cost of doing business. Key issues to bear in mind when going to these sort of arrangements are the tenures of these BOT concessions. Usually they range between 25 to 30 years. Mostly governments will also insist on royalty payments, particularly on gross revenues that are derived from this business. Issues about land rental, and lately the fashion has been for the grantor of some of these infrastructure facilities to have a shareholding in special purpose vehicles that are set up, rather than having to concede public facilities 100%. Issues like signing on fees and the need to have job security for locals, and to ensure that there are performance guarantees that the private sector would commit themselves to the obligations that they have set in the agreement. And at times, to defining this scope is very important, because as the saying goes, you wouldn't want to put all your eggs in one basket. That's why some of these concession scopes are important. I think I'm moving faster than what has been projected. Well, this is just if you can go back one slide. Yeah, this is just a spatial arrangement, what we're trying to explain in terms of the Trans-Africa highway that is connecting between Lagos to Dakar. Local content provision is also important, because as public institutions, you would want to create local champions, like happens in many other countries, rather than having foreign investors come and take away all the benefits, and repatriate the capital. Some of the concession scopes should be clearly identified to ensure that some aspects of the ancillary support facilities and infrastructure remain to locals. And things about exclusivity, they also need to be looked at critically. Because if a 25-year concession is needed, you would want to have a situation where the exclusivity doesn't expand the whole term, at least 7 to 8 years prior to the expiry of the term. The handback protocol should at least start to be negotiated, so that you would not get handed over a facility that the country cannot be able to utilize after the concession. Well, overall, international trade and logistics are faced with emerging challenges. If you look at what is happening in the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, for example, these are some of the vulnerabilities because of geopolitical situations that can really affect trade. And what we have seen is developing countries generally perform worse with higher costs and lower connectivity. The consequence of these economies of scale, greater distances from overseas markets and lower levels of digitalization, and smaller economies like the Gambia need support to mitigate some of these increased costs and lower the connectivity challenges. Thank you.